And we're live. Welcome, everyone, to another High Vibe Conversation. I'm your host, Shel Shapiro. With me today, we've got Linda Vetrus Nichols, Jenny Langren, Dorit Carlson, Stina Marie, and today's special guest, Tetyana Azarova. Tetyana, welcome. We're so excited to have you join us to discuss the power of illusion. I wonder if you could take a moment to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are.
Thank you, Shell, and thank you for inviting me to this beautiful community of women. Very powerful, very energetic. I am happy to be here. I right now work as a coach and provide psychological and spiritual support to people in their life journeys who are going through difficult times and need emotional support or making sense of their challenging situations in life, or just trying to get a different perspective on their transformation. So I can call myself a transformational coach, but it goes by different names. Sometimes people call me a healer because the healing can happen in such coaching sessions too. Uh, in my practice, I utilize a compassionate inquiry. That's a psychotherapeutic approach developed by Dr. Gabor Mate. I got trained in this approach. I also utilize some wisdom and learning I gained through my PhD journey in human and organizational development, and I focused on deeper perspective of human inspiration in the period of difficult situations in life. So that's, I hope, enough for my introduction.
Yes, thank you so much. It's more than enough. Before we get more fully into today's topic, I want to welcome everyone who is tuning in, whether you're catching us here live or on the replay. Thank you for joining us. I want to remind you that this is a safe space, and we invite you to share with us as we talk through our life lessons and hold space for you to work through yours. So, what this means is that if at any point you feel like the conversation is resonating with you, you've got expertise and insights that you also want to share in this area, we'd love to hear from you. And you can absolutely leave your comments, thoughts, insights in the chat. We will, of course, love to have more conversations with you and continue that conversation wherever possible. Of course, if you'd like to have a high vibe conversation more privately and intimately, here's a link where you can book a one-to-one conversation with the high vibe lady of your choosing. And if you are here for the first time, or if you're a repeat visitor, we encourage you to catch up on all the previous conversations. You can do that by subscribing to the YouTube channel seen on your screen below. And also, it will notify you when more conversations are coming your way. So without further ado, let's get into today's topic, the power of illusion. Tetyana, I'm going to pop right over to you with this. You mentioned that you help people with psychological and emotional support. So I feel like this conversation topic really lends itself to your areas of expertise. What is like the primary thing that's coming up for you to kick us off with the power of illusion?
So something that I would focus on, there's of course many angles that one can focus talking about illusion, but what I'm witnessing once talking about inquiring about people's transformational journey or journey of current struggles and challenges or whatever is going on in life, quite often it comes to people's perspective of self or understanding of self. And we know this from different spiritual traditions, from psychology as well, that people have quite a misconception, or we can call it illusion, about who they are. And they can consider themselves by so many different things, personas, identities, be completely confused about it, and sometimes not only confused, but rigidly hold a certain view of who they are. And often this view is not even their view. It's something that they acquired from the collective, from society, from parents, from workplace, from many other people, sometimes from people who were talking to them in mean and abusive terms, and kind of implanted some very bad ideas of who this person is, but that's not true. And quite often this whole inquiry comes to opening up this person to see themselves in a different light and understand that those views are really not who they are.
I love that. So you've helped people to take away that illusion and to stand more in their power as opposed to that illusion or disillusionment that they've been living in. What are some, I don't want to jump the gun necessarily, but we're here. So what are some tips that you might have for people to remove that illusion or to get started doing that?
One of the possibility could be, let's say the person has a certain story that they heard over and over again, quite often in childhood. People tend to stick to certain stories and beliefs that are formed out of the stories. And there is like a whole field of psychology and compassionate inquiry as well, focuses on uncovering all those beliefs and all those stories. And quite often people are not conscious of what's going on and what those stories are. So my focus as someone who walks along with this person, to listen and to hear them and mirror that to this person when they say specific phrases or words, and bring this to the light and say, is this you, or is this story that you heard, and how back the story goes, how back how early your memories go, and then the whole like new world can open up, and the person can look around and see, oh, I've heard this over and over again. This was something going on the back of my mind, and they can come to even sometimes to recollection when this first started, and see that this wasn't me. I heard this, and this was repeating itself again in different situations. And at some point I started believing in this, and at some point I started developing certainties that this is who I am, and certain anxieties about this, and certain fears, and maybe all kind of other different challenging emotional relationship to this image.
I love the idea of mirroring back to the person to reflect and to see how they respond to that. So I think this is a great practice to get in the habit of, and I love that you're already doing this work. So thank you, Linda. I'm coming over to you now. What's coming up for you as we're talking about the power of illusion?
Thank you. What came for me is, like, so agree, the power of our stories, Tetyana. Oh, it's amazing. And I had a very powerful experience with that. I had gone to an event, and there were different vendors that had booths, and one of the vendors was an orthobionomist. So she did orthobionomy, and she had like a massage chair there for it. And so I was sitting in the chair, and I said, do you think you could release this shoulder? My right shoulder is so tight, even like a chiropractor can't really get under there. And I did have chiropractic where they got under a little bit, rocked it out, and it felt a little bit better, but it's still so painful after all these years. And she said, well, why, what happened? Why is your shoulder so tight? And I said, well, I had lost my father to suicide in like just before going back to school for my senior year. And then I had a gymnastics accident, and I did a round off the end, and the mat was there was no crash pad in the day, and the girl ahead of me had slid the mat, so I landed on the metal part of the beam, and then I crashed over to my right shoulder. And she said, there was more drama to the story as I told her. She goes, retell that story, retell it. Like, so like the opposite, like it didn't happen. She goes, yeah. So I told it as if nothing had happened. I just did wonderful and ta-da, end of routine, and there was no accident. And my husband was standing behind me, and I heard it too. It was like clunk. My shoulder blade dropped right into place in retelling the story as if it hadn't happened. So story is an illusion, and it's a very powerful one. So I love this subject.
We've certainly spent a lot of conversations too, like talking about the stories that we tell ourselves and how we've relearned who we are through that process and untold or retold those stories. So I love your example too, Linda. So thank you.
Thank you. And with my clients, if they have a trauma story where a parent treated them poorly or whatever, it's like, well, how did you want to be treated? And then I have them retell the story that way. And that has changed people a lot.
I know that Jenny can also speak to this as the work that she does with her clients and for herself and her kids too. So Jenny, I'm coming down to you. What's coming up for you as we're talking more and more about the power of illusion?
Ooh, I love having Tetyana joining us. Just want to mention that. Well, I'm going back in time to 10 years in marriage with a man with a very grandiose self-image, and how he had a very powerful illusion of who he was and how he was not accountable in life and in our lives. And I also remember myself building my illusion based upon that, and building my illusion, adapting and covering up. And both of our illusions were really based on shame and the fear of coming too close, the fear of actually opening up, of actually spending that time with ourselves to know who we are. And that's true for both of us. So today, this is the piece of compassion that I get to bring in to the work with my clients, just encouraging them and giving them examples of how they are looking at themselves with loving eyes and curious and compassionate eyes, that you actually want to open up. You want to know, you want to self-discover, and that's a joy to see all those hidden parts of ourselves. And yeah, that's what's coming in. And I know Tetyana speaks on compassion beautifully, so I'd love to hear you tie back on that as well.
Well, thank you, Jenny. I'm going to pass it back to Tetyana to speak on the compassion piece before I pass it over to Dorit, because I just lost the other thought that I was going to bring. So hopefully while you're doing that, anything thoughts come flooding back in. Tetyana, Jenny gave you the floor to speak on compassion, and I'd love to hear your thoughts as well.
Thank you, Jenny, and thank you, Linda. I quite resonated with your life examples that you brought. And I've been in such situations where I was with clients and could have started with what seems like an innocent question. Like, I had one client that actually came to me. She said, "Oh, I have this fear, and my business doesn't go well, and I don't know what's causing this and why it's affecting my business." So, without any thoughts about where this can lead, you sit with someone and you think it's a business question, but when it goes deeper and deeper, and it goes somewhere along the lines to the fears that have roots in the childhood experience, some horrific childhood experiences. And let's say, and this client comes back to the memories when she held from when she was 9 or 10 years old and participated in some rituals that were so kind of traumatizing, and she couldn't understand what's going on. And she was still stuck in that memory of that little girl. Like in a session, I could see that little girl coming in, and she still was horrified, and those memories were coming. Something dark, some dark visions, and you see that the person is still suffering there. This little girl is still there, and I am there to hold a space with her for that compassion and that light that this girl was expecting in that moment. And 50 years later, she was still waiting for that light, for that fairy to come and save her. And we were holding the space, and through tears and through whatever was going in her body, in her emotional space, she was telling me, she was reflecting, and she was connecting with her body and with her memories, with her emotions, allowing herself now as an adult to hold that little girl compassionately. And I am just present as a witness. That fairy just showed up and was bringing light to that whole space, and that whole space transformed, and the fear started to dissolve. And I was at awe, because I could not predict this. I could not, this was very magical. I felt like this magic was happening in the moment. And it wasn't me. It was something happening in the space. We were co-creators, and this woman was doing this to herself, to that little 9-year-old girl, bringing this light, that beauty, a different, restoring, different story, as Linda said, a positive outcome, a positive transformation. And those memories were kind of rewriting itself on the bodily level. So that's kind of, I wanted to connect what Linda and what Jenny said. It's a very compassionate way of accepting yourself and giving yourself a different positive future in that present.
I love, Tetyana, how you mentioned that, like, it was all them. Like, you asked the initial question, but then all of the inner work and the store and everything just came flooding out of them, and it was almost like you were a fly on the wall, just observing it and holding that space for them. But I love that idea of, and even putting it into practice, that you've created a safe space for somebody to be able to get vulnerable enough to open up and share that with you. Even if that's not, you just asked the question, right? You had no idea that's where the conversation was going to lead. So I love that people have safety, and that goes back to the psychological safety that you help them create within themselves too, and some of the work that you've done. So thank you for adding to that. I love it. Dorit, I'm coming down to you now. What's coming up for you as we're talking about the power of illusion?
Well, when I was going to speak right after Jenny, I had something I wanted to say, but now hearing Tetyana, that completely changed, because as you speak, Tetyana, I understand that the way that I work with my clients and the way that you work brings up a lot of the same things. I have had very, very similar experiences with my clients, where they find the reason, the cause of what happened in the childhood that was affecting their lives in the present day, and by guiding them back, just by asking questions like you do, letting them find that little girl or little guy, and give them let them have the safety and support that they needed at that time. I also invite them to bring this little child with them, now in a healed state, and go through the timeline up to adulthood and see for themselves in their mind how things would have changed, what difference it would have made if they had had that security and comfort when that terrible things happened to them. For instance, I had this one client, she came to me because she had a financial problem. She burned through her salary like in 2 days. Everything was gone. She couldn't hold money at all. She got quite a big inheritance, and that disappeared like poof, you know. And she was so frustrated over herself, and she had tried everything, like courses in financial work and doing things by the book, working with the bank. She couldn't do it. It just like burned her. That's how she explained it. It just burns me. I have to get rid of the money. And during the first session, she went back to when she was a little girl and she was babysitting for a neighbor. And this young boy came by, and he had molested her and paid her to keep her mouth shut. And he kept doing that. He kept giving her money to keep her mouth shut. So she associated the money with something that was horrible, something that she didn't want, and she couldn't find a way to get out of it. And that had kind of built up this need to get the money away. She didn't want anything to do with it because money was associated with something that was terrible for her. So by seeing that, she had completely blocked that out. She didn't, when I asked her, she didn't even remember that. Her brain had wrapped that in cotton and hid it in the back corner. So, but by seeing that and by being there for her young self, she was able to heal that little girl and take the necessary steps and heal her future. Yeah. So that ended really well for her when she was able to find all those nice things that she could do for her young self and give the support and love that the little one needed. So yeah.
I'm
Thank you,
taking in
Doris.
that story. Tetyana, what was coming up for you there?
There's a lot of resonance, and as Dorit was describing this, I could completely see this, like as if I was a third witness on this session or this conversation. This comes so often in sessions like I hold, and I know others hold, like in compassionate inquiry, like some of my colleagues. And it just brings us to the instances of trauma that a lot of us, many of us, almost everyone carries, and how much we need this compassionate space and this compassionate witness, someone who can be with us without judgment as a human being, that human connection. To be able, I call this when I speak with my clients, like once a metaphor came to me, which my clients related to, like, I'm gonna hold you by hand and we're gonna go into the basement of your self as a house, into that dark basement. So don't be scared. We can go step by step into that basement. And this is what happens because many people in this traumatic experiences, they block the memories. It's a self-defense mechanism for survival. And something may be holding them from enjoying their life in full right now, or sometimes not even enjoying, but really harming their life and the life of their families. And they need to revisit that memory. They need to see in a different light what happened, to understand and rewrite that story, as Linda said, because they should not be prisoners of that story. They don't need to. They don't need to suffer. That's unnecessary suffering. And that's the power of illusions that are trauma-based. We have so any trauma-based illusions that sometimes are ruling our lives and keep us in this cycle of traumatic experiences, like recurring. We don't need to live that way.
Right. Tetyana, do you see a difference between blocked memory and an amnesic memory? It would be kind of the same.
I don't know in technical terms if there is a difference, but I know that there is a coping mechanism if something is very traumatic, especially in a childhood situation when child cannot even make sense of what's going on. The whole emotional and mental apparatus is not yet developed to make sense of this, and it's so painful, so traumatic that memory gets blocked. It's just a physiological response, almost like to wipe out as if this didn't happen. Or sometimes people also dissociate, almost like going to different illusionary world or something imaginary or whatever to keep themselves separate from what happened, from that difficult reality.
Thank you. Thank you. Stina, I'm coming down to you. Last but not least, what's coming up for you as we've been talking about the power of illusion?
Thanks, Jill. On the topic of witnessing, I'm remembering a study about doulas that showed if there's just a doula sitting in the room with the birthing woman, she doesn't have to do anything, just to be there, it actually improves birth outcomes for mom and baby. So there's just so much power in being present with someone and knowing that that person is there to unconditionally witness and support you. And that's my biggest takeaway from doing my doula training, was how to meet someone where they're at and really like get them to feel, I am here with you. I'm not going anywhere. We're going to get through this together. And that's such a powerful energy to bring to any situation, but particularly, trauma or working through trauma, and just that intensity of like feeling immersed in support when you're actually with someone who can hold that space. And doulas are also trained to focus on, the needs, desires, requests, like of the woman, the birthing woman. It's not about, as a doula, what do I think is the right choice, or what would I do if I was her? And so it brings a new perspective to what it means to actually look at something objectively and also honor like the other person's subjective experience, instead of just being in empathy with them. Like it's different, I think, to be in empathy with someone, or sympathy and empathy, versus witnessing them and really seeing things more clearly. And I had just written down, I'm not sure even now what exactly brought this up, but I think maybe Linda mentioned something, because the theme of healthy detachment, being able to be in healthy detachment. And I think that comes from actually healthy attachment. So if you're in a really anxious or a really avoidant state of attachment, you can't have that healthy detachment, because you can't separate and then come back together, and then separate and come back together. Like that's a natural, normal part of relationships. We don't spend every moment with other people. We don't know all of their thoughts. We can't anticipate all of their behavior. And so there's a comfort in like the unknown. And I find the more comfort I have in the unknown, and the more able I am to do that kind of like back and forth and have that kind of elasticity in a relationship, the more, oh shoot, what was I going to say? The more that I'm comfortable in the unknown, that's what it was. The more that I'm comfortable in the unknown, the less story I need to tell about things. And so that in turn keeps you out of some of those cycles of illusion and, making assumptions about things and getting really worked up about it. And like going into, for me, it's like the OCD rumination, or like in this loop about something. And you learn to take that energy. I've learned to take that energy and go, wow, my brain is so creative. Look at all of these stories I can create. And what if I took that and did something else with it? What else would I like to create? What stories would benefit me? What stories would uplift me, inspire me, motivate me to keep going? Like, we have the power of story, and it's just easier by default to use it in ways that are not always the most helpful, because it plays on that survival instinct and all of our kind of raging hormones that come, cortisol and adrenaline, and like really easy to let our stories get taken away in that direction. But when you start to turn it and say, you know what, I'm actually a really incredibly creative human, that this anxiety wants to fill in all these blanks and try to know the unknowable. And what if I could use that to my advantage? So I have really enjoyed playing with story in that way too.
I love that, Stina. That idea of whole to part, part to whole is also a developmental skill that many adults don't have and get into big trouble in their relationships just in conversation, being able to have my thought, put it in the middle, and then your thought, put it in the middle, and then mix it up a little bit, and then our thought, or if we're not in agreement, go back and, redo. So I love that. And then that brings me to filters, and what is the filter that you're putting there to get a certain story? And what if you changed your filter? What would that story be? And then from the filters, choose the story that you'd like to be telling yourself. And that takes me to Jenny's idea of staying curious and asking curious questions. So, yeah.
I love everything that people have shared today. So thank you, each of you, for being here. We've talked a lot about the power of illusion and how we each have navigated our own power and the stories we've told ourselves, and also the way that we help other people navigate that too. So it's been a wonderful conversation to dive into. I especially want to thank Tetyana for joining us today. Tetyana, before we wrap up, I want to give you the opportunity to let people know how they can find you, how can they work with you, what do they need to know about you, and all any juicy things that you want to share.
I work kind of privately through referrals most of the time, and people can find me on Facebook, or I just share my email, which is easy. It's cosmicplanets@gmail.com. If they have inquiries and they feel a resonance and need some kind of coaching support. And one thing I wanted to mention, because it was coming up as I was listening to Stina, and what helps us to dispel illusions is also that spiritual dimension of self, which Stina beautifully described, how doula there with that presence is connecting to that plane of possibilities that beyond our preconceived ideas of self and those beliefs that implanted in our minds by others, that plane of possibilities, that Tao that cannot be described or known, can come up with all kind of miracles and all kind of healing possibilities if we give it a space. And that's something that deserves a whole another discussion. It's a big topic for discussion, but that's really tapping into who you are, into all dimension of self. And this one in this society quite often is overlooked and underestimated.
Wow. Overlooked and underestimated. I really don't think that about any of us now that I know all of our stories more completely. So I love that, Tetyana. Thank you so much again for being here and joining us. Thank you, ladies, for coming back week to week and for having these wonderful high vibe conversations as well. Again, if you are catching us live or on the replay, please make sure to connect with us. Reach out, let us know what you like, what you don't. And we'd love to hear from you and have more of these conversations with you. Until next time, we will end this conversation for now and say bye.